So here we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us as you come in. Why are there no attendees? Oh, there's an attendee. Okay, good. We're going to give a few moments for people to log on here. Give me just a moment.
Can you hear me now?
So far, there's only one person in the attendee room. Oh, here we go. Now we've got a few more people coming in. Usually they come in right away. I'm like, what did I screw up this time? Okay. Very good. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll do a introduction for in just a few moments. Now there is a chat. If you guys can find the chat towards the bottom of your screen. The chat feature there is how we're going to be using to ask questions, and because unless you can find the Q&A function, which should be live, but I'm not seeing it on my screen. If you can find the Q&A, we're going to ask questions in the Q&A. If not, you can put them in the chat, and you can ask you can chat to the panelists privately, or you can make your chat information live to everybody by right above where you type, you pull down the list, and it says to all panelists and attendees. There you go. And let's see here. Let's give it just about 30 more seconds, then I'll get started here. Just checking. So we've got an amazing group of ladies joining us today, and going to talk about the importance of women in politics. I'm very excited about this one. So about 8:15, 8:30 this morning, Eastern Time, became the official 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, while it was passed in Tennessee back on August 18th. The 19th Amendment did not become official and officially enrolled as part of the Constitution until this morning. It took it a few days to get from Tennessee, the paperwork to get from Tennessee to Washington, D.C. And the Secretary of State, who is in charge of signing off on the amendment paperwork to make it official, actually did nothing, no fanfare, nothing. He just signed the paperwork, dropped it off at the Library of Congress, and it became official just like that. So I feel a little sad for the suffragettes that they didn't get their moment standing with the president, kind of laughing in his face because of all their suffering, and saying, you know, we did this and we got the vote. One thing I think it's always important, and it was pointed out to me when we did a history lesson on the actual August 18th, was that women have always had the right to vote. It's just that the government has taken it away from us from time to time. And that's why it was so important to pass the 19th Amendment, was to guarantee that nobody could have the government take away their right to vote. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we will get started. This is the Leadership Institute. This is our panel to celebrate the 19th Amendment, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. The Leadership Institute is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit. This is our webpage that you're looking at right here. We've been around for 40 years. Our mission is to increase the number and effectiveness of conservative advocates in public policy and politics. And we do that by hosting trainings. We got started 40 years ago when Morton Blackwell was working for the Ronald Reagan campaign, and they found out that the young people they were hiring fresh out of college to work on the campaign didn't know how to do the things you need to do in order to win a campaign, whether that's pick up the phone to ask volunteers to come out, or what to do with those volunteers once they did show up. So he volunteered to start traveling around the country and training in the young staffers, and that became the Leadership Institute. Right now, because we are in interesting times, we do have a ton of opportunities for training that are available online, and you can see all of our different training opportunities at leadershipinstitute.org on this /training page. And we also have our on-demand. And this class will be on demand, this discussion will be on demand in our Campaign Pro class, and I will be sending out information to you on that following this class. I want to thank the ladies who are joining us today for this opportunity and this discussion. We've got quite the group. Oops, hold on. Stop sharing. That's what I meant to do. We've got quite the group of wonderful women who are active in public policy and politics right now, women that I've worked with from across the country. I'm going to first introduce Jenifer Sarver, and then I'm going to turn off my microphone and video and let her moderate from there. Jenifer is an activist and a communications professional down in Texas, although she's coming to us from Oregon today. But she has worked for the Bush White House, I believe, or at least the Bush administration. She's done so much stuff. Jenifer, tell us more about who you are, and then go ahead and begin.
Well, Dina, thank you so much. And thank you to the Leadership Institute for hosting this town hall today. I know we've heard a lot about the 19th Amendment this month, and I'm excited to have this specific conversation with an amazing group of talented women, many of whom are friends of mine, which is so fun to be with you all today and to see you virtually. I am a communications consultant based in Austin, Texas. I worked in the Bush administration and also for U.S. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison. Where I often say that I got a PhD in Texas working for her, learning more about my state and what it is to deliver excellent constituent service, and also how to uphold our conservative values. And so I feel like I just had the privilege of a lifetime to work for her, and it's been an important part of my career thus far. I run my own communication consulting business where I help people tell their stories more effectively. I do a lot of training and have been privileged to do some training for the Leadership Institute to help candidates and campaigns work on their message and tell their story. And so I love to tell stories. I love to hear stories, and I hope you'll hear some interesting ones today as we talk about the centennial of the 19th Amendment, what it means, the work that has been done so far to increase women's participation in politics and public policy, and also how far we have to go and what we can do to encourage and motivate and inspire others to get involved. And so we have really collected a great group of women who can speak to so many aspects of campaigns and public policy and being in elected office. And so I'd like to go ahead and start off by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves, just a quick 30-second introduction. And I'm going to start with my friend from New Mexico, Kelly Fajardo, if you'd tell us a little bit about yourself and the lens you bring to this.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for this, and thank you for putting this together. I'm State Representative Kelly Fajardo. I am a state legislator here in New Mexico. I'm also the founder of an organization called RISE, where we try and equip women and get them involved with public policy and politics. I'm also a mom, and as of Sunday, I am a grandmother to two. So we have a new little baby to add to our family. So thank you for, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I'd like to turn it over next to my friend Dawn Crandall.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I am in Michigan. We are still facing some struggles of COVID. My day job, as I like to call it, is I'm the political affairs director and lobbyist for the Home Builders Association of Michigan. And then I'm also the president of the Michigan Excellence in Public Service Series, which is a Republican training program for women to get involved. I'm proud to say we have 7 of our graduates serving in the State House right now, and several serving in local offices as well. I'm also, just as recently, the founder and CEO of She Holds the Key, which is a 501c3 conservative training program for women. And then I also sit on Kelly's board for RISE. And so I've got multi-facets. My tentacles are everywhere.
You are everywhere, but you always have a passion for ensuring that women's voices are heard and they're involved in the process. So thank you for all that you do. My next one, I head down to Dallas, Texas, to my friend Sarah Jackson to introduce herself.
Thank you, Jenifer. Thank you, Leadership Institute, for hosting this event today. I'm Sarah Jackson. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Public Affairs for the Dallas Citizens Council. I'm born in Dallas, raised in Mesquite, right near Dallas, and I started my political career working for the Pete Sessions campaign in 2004, and then went on to a staff right after that, and was on Capitol Hill as a communications press secretary, and then went on to the Bush administration at the U.S. State Department with an appointment from President Bush. After that, I decided it was time to come home to Texas, and so I got my master's in public affairs, public administration from the Bush School at Texas A&M. So I'm a Mizzou Tiger in journalism, and I am an Aggie. Jenifer and I always have interesting conversations related But yeah, I worked in Republican communications and politics for quite a while now, and I'm excited for this conversation, particularly as it relates to women of color, particularly Black women in the conservative movement.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. We're so excited to have you and really important voice in this conversation. And we have a friendly rivalry between the Longhorns and the Aggies. And I'm happy to say that our conferences are planning on playing football. We'll see if that happens after all. But I'd like to next go over to the National Federation of Republican Women and have Ann Shockett introduce herself.
Hi there. I want to thank Dina and Jenifer for this wonderful opportunity to participate in your Leadership Institute Town Hall. I'm a proud American and president of the National Federation of Republican Women, which is the largest national grassroots Republican women's organization in the United States, and we were founded 82 years ago. I'm a transplanted New Yorker living in Alexandria, Virginia, and spending every waking moment, which now, of course, due to COVID, is 7 days a week, to advancing our mission to build leaders, energize communities, and keep America strong. I'm a businesswoman. I am been involved in politics now and public service for 40 years. I founded my own corporate multimedia production company, and now I'm a consultant. I'm a founding board member of Save the Persecuted Christians, and I'm so pleased to serve on many different boards. I guess my passion really lies in helping others achieve, and I'm inspired by faith, my country, my family, and my love, especially from my 5 grandchildren who now live only minutes away since I moved here.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds like a full plate, Ann, and we'll look forward to hearing more about NFRW and what you all are doing to help encourage and inspire women to continue to lead and be involved. I'd like to turn it over next to Adrienne to tell us a little bit about herself.
Hello, I'm Adrienne Royer, and I'm based in Falls Church, Virginia, so a little bit down the street from Ann. I'm originally from Chattanooga, Tennessee, so go Vols. I guess if I have to get involved in the Texas, I'm going to support the Aggies, stay with the loyal, the SEC. But I come to this very excited because it's always great to hear conservative women talking about this issue, since it's so dominated by liberal and the left. So I think a lot of times the media likes to pretend that conservative women don't exist. But I come from the tech world. I'm currently the digital communications specialist for CMGI, which is a software company that builds the software that most Republican campaigns in state parties, the RNC use, called Crimson or Crimson Filer. So we are basically the TurboTax of FEC. I do a lot of tech work. I do a lot of UX design, graphic design. My educational background is in journalism and public relations, and I kind of fell into the tech world, and it's so I'm happy to represent that voice.
Adrienne, we're so delighted to have you here, and I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for anybody else, but the tech world still mystifies me in many ways. So we're so grateful for all the hard work you do behind the scenes to make everybody look good, and also to make sure that they get paid and they get their taxes done properly. Last but certainly not least, we're going to go to Julianne in Virginia.
Good afternoon. I'm Julianne Condrey, joining you from Richmond, Virginia, and I am delighted to join you incredible women for this celebratory discussion. I'm a government relations consultant at the state level, and I've held a variety of positions on federal, state, and local political campaigns, as well as legislative aid in state level offices. I've also held a variety of positions in the private sector and nonprofit space. I'm the founder of the Virginia Conservative Women's Coalition, which is dedicated to encouraging women to lead in their communities, including running for office. And so I'm grateful to be here today with you all.
Thank you so much, Julianne. And I do want to take this moment to also just acknowledge another organization that several of these ladies are part of, the Women's Public Leadership Network. And it is an organization that is fairly new, and I'm the national board chair of that group, but Dawn and Kelly and Julianne and their organizations are all part of our group, and we're a group that is recruiting and training conservative women to run for office. And we're looking at helping build up the infrastructure on the center right to encourage more women to get involved in politics. And kind of one of the things you said, Adrienne, that stuck with me is, you know, a lot of times there's this narrative that women involved in politics are all on the left. And we know that's not true. And so I think that this opportunity for us to share our voices and our passion for our conservative values and encourage other women to speak up and get involved is so important. So if you're interested in learning more about the Women's Public Leadership Network, please look us up online. I'd love for you to know more about the work that we're doing. I want to first go, as we kick off this conversation, to Ann. to really talk to us about why it's important to be telling the story of the suffragists and what significance does it have to us today.
Thank you so much, Jenifer. The suffragists, as we all know, were the grassroots female activists of their time, and their struggle to achieve the right to vote and to be seen as equals to men under the law was such a long and arduous battle, so many decades. And today it's a celebration of their 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. What an achievement, what an incredible achievement. They weren't given the right, but they fought for it and they won it. And we must never forget that. Theirs is a lesson in persistence and perseverance and overcoming obstacles. Not only did they have to advocate through letter writing, speeches and rallies and marches, but they also had to endure hunger strikes, violence and brutality during incarceration. So what is the significance? We women face our own hurdles today, whether we're advocating for an issue or we're trying to right a wrong. And looking at the strength and the determination of those women, our grandmothers and great-grandmothers, women of what we consider to be a bygone era, who didn't know whether or not they'd even see their efforts come to fruition, really should inspire us. It should teach us the lesson that no matter how difficult the road ahead is, and no matter the odds, we need to keep on fighting. And fighting also, may I add, for the political party that enabled women to secure the right to vote, which was the Republican Party. And I might add also that the women's Republican groups that were the trailblazers that supported the 19th Amendment congealed, they gelled, and they federated to form the National Federation of Republican Women 82 years ago. And they were successful in getting their message out, even without Facebook and Twitter.
Yes, it's hard to imagine organizing and mobilizing without social media. But thank you for that kind of primer for us, Anne. I think it's so important for us to recognize that history, recognize how hard fought it was, recognize the way that those ladies sacrificed on our behalf. But I think it's important that we recognize that the application of the 19th Amendment wasn't even. And I'd love to hear from my friend Sarah Jackson about what women of color have had to overcome and how their ability to access the vote was not the same as white women's, and what we can do now to make sure that we're becoming more welcoming and inviting and ensuring diversity, particularly within conservative politics.
Yeah, no, Jen, thank you for the question and for raising this. It's been really interesting, as many of you know, and as Anne just shared, you know, the Republican Party has been instrumental throughout our nation's history in not only providing the right to vote to, you know, women, but also to Black men. If you go back and study our history right after Reconstruction, there's a new PBS documentary that actually came out, if you've got time, called Reconstruction. And it's really fascinating, where you learn that some of the first legislators right after Reconstruction were Black conservatives, as some of you probably know. And so there is a real history with the Black community in our nation and Republican Party. And so I think with that, you know, what's interesting though, is that Black women though wouldn't really get the right to vote until 64, right? The Voting Rights Act. And so when you think about that, to Jen's question, I mean, it's really been centuries. And so what you're seeing now, though, in history, I think, and at this moment in time in our country, is that Black women, you see it in a lot of states and races the last couple of years, are becoming really instrumental for getting candidates right over the hurdle, whether it's through mobilization, through groups like the Links Incorporated, which I'm a member of the Dallas chapter here in Texas, but it's a national organization of over 288 prominent business African-American women, including now vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris, that are mobilizing and partnering to try to get Black women to work together through sororities and other organized groups or informal groups to vote. And I think as conservatives, as Jen and I have talked about in the past, and would love to continue this conversation with many of you, I think there's a real opportunity here for women of color, particularly Black women, to become very instrumental in the way we are moving, through showing not only in our compassion and our understanding of some of the issues that are really relevant to the Black community, but also through the understanding of equity and public policy. The Republican Party has always been a forward-thinking party. I think at some point in history, people started thinking we were stodgy. I don't know where that came from. When you study our history, we were forward-thinking people. We are forward-thinking people, and we just think, I'd say a little bit right of center ideologically as to how to move our country forward. And I think there's a great opportunity now with Black women to do that. And so there's a lot more discussion to be had on this topic, but just top of mind, those would be some of my thoughts on this topic, Jen.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I think it is an ongoing discussion and an important one, particularly at this moment in our nation's history. And I think it's really important not to let one political party to the other just absolutely seed an entire group of people, right? I think that there's this tendency to say, well, they're going to vote Democrat or they're going to vote Republicans, and we don't need to communicate with them. We need better messengers. We have an excellent message of hope and opportunity, limited government, personal responsibility and accountability. I think we need better messengers. And I think women can be very effective messengers for that. And so one of the things I'd love to ask Dawn about is what can we do to encourage more conservative women to use their voice to talk about those values and not cede the conversation to the other side?
Right. Well, I think first, we have to ask them. I think, when I look at within our state, we have the strictest term limits in the country. So in the state house, they can serve for 3 2-year terms for a total of 6, and in the Senate, 8 for 2 4-year terms, and then you're done. There is no sitting out. There is no coming back. So we have this constant churn that we're always like, I guess the only good thing I can say about term limits is it gives us the time to find like good candidates, right? But I think so many times that go-to candidate is always like either somebody with a name or they're male. And no offense to the males who have run, like they've done an amazing job, but we need to ask conservative women to run, and we need to give them that training in that safe place that they can test their message, that they can have their thoughts and ideas where they're in what we call at MEPS, a safe place to have the conversation so that we can help them refine their message, so that like I don't want to have women elected just because they're women. I want them to be elected because they are the best candidate at that podium when they are speaking, which means they know the issues. We give them issues training. And I think, we have to ask them, we have to ask them, we have to ask them, we have to ask them. I think I've heard a statistic that women have to be asked anywhere from 7 to 13 times before they consider it, because they have those barriers of they don't feel qualified. They don't feel like they know enough to be an elected official. And we have to be there for them and ask them, and then continue to support them through the process. So whatever that looks like in terms of, for me as a lobbyist, I try and take those women to meet with other trade associations and other groups to help them raise that money and get their message across and build their own base and their own network. But it's helping them build that network and asking them to run.
I love that. Yes, we've all heard that same statistic. A woman has to be asked at least 7 times. And so I usually take the platform opportunity to say, if you are listening to this and you're thinking about running for office, consider yourself asked. This is one of your 7 times, and there's 7 of us on the screen. So now we're collectively asking you, so you can go forth and do it. I'd love to turn it over to Kelly as our elected official on the panel, who has been in the trenches and is currently in the trenches. To talk about, okay, we encourage women to run for office, and it's easy to encourage people to do it. I myself ran, so I know what it's like to run. I don't know what it's like to be in elected office, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that from you, Kelly, on kind of what's the biggest political change that you've seen since you've been elected? Kelly, you're muted. I'm sure whatever you said was beautiful. Let's start over.
Thank you so much. I was trying to stay a little bit muted so I could hear everybody. So I'm going into my 8th year as an elected in the New Mexico State Legislature, and it's really changed over the years as far as just the atmosphere. And this is why I think there's such a huge opportunity for women right now in elected office. There's a divisiveness that exists that has never been there before. And women, we can argue over certain policies and certain things, but I think we come together when it comes to the fundamental issues as far as our children and childcare and those types of things. And those are the bridges that we need to be building. And men just don't, I don't want to say don't care, but they don't have that nurturing aspect. Women can multitask. We have such ability. I heard a statistic once that in Congress, the U.S. Congress, female congresswomen carry less legislation but get more passed. Because the legislation that we carry, we tend to have an investment in and we want to see passed. And I think that's important. And so there's a lot of divisiveness going on right now. We see it on a federal level, we see it at a local level, where I think there's a bridge for women to kind of get involved and intersect because of our nature, because of who we are, and because we can kind of see both sides. We tend to be better listeners than we are talkers. And so there's a huge opportunity for us. And, you know, we need to, I want to see more people like me. You know, I want to see more women at the table to have their voices heard. I want to see diversity at the table because I think it makes for a better conversation. And those conversations just are not happening right now.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, Kelly, that, you know, the more diverse voices we can bring to the table, the more reflective our government becomes of our country. And right now, our government doesn't reflect our country, both from a race standpoint and also from an ideological standpoint. One of the challenges with the increase in women running for office has been incredibly lopsided. Right, so you look at Congress, and there's tons of new women in Congress. In 2018 was this banner year for women, but it was predominantly Democratic women. And so one of the things we have to think about as conservatives is what are we doing wrong and how do we fix that? How do we encourage more women to run for office, but also not just run for office, really create that pipeline of service and public service. So Julianne, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the ways that women can get involved beyond just running for office?
Absolutely. When many women hear the phrase run for office, they immediately conjure up images of the West Wing, or probably more accurately Veep, and that might not be a good fit for everyone. While running for school board or board of supervisors might not be as intimidating as, say, running for Congress, you may find your niche as a campaign staff or as an aide in an official's office or in government relations as a lobbyist. The fact is, women continue to be leaders in their communities, and for each person that may look a little different depending on personality, personal interests, and skill sets. Women serve on the local PTA, volunteering for local charities, tutoring kids in a local learning pod, which is common this year, or a homeschool co-op. There are also appointed positions on boards and commissions on which you can serve at the city or state level, centered around a myriad of issues, ranging from managing the board of a historic home owned by the city, or the Architectural Review Board, the State Civic Education Commission, or the Sister Cities Commission, for example. And these typically don't get a lot of attention. In fact, a lot of people aren't even aware that they exist or that citizen participants are on these boards and commission. But this is a good way in which you can have a seat at the table in an area of your interest or expertise. And my guess is that most women are already influencing without realizing it. Let us not forget that the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. And raising children or being an influence on young people in your family or community can have a lasting impact beyond your lifetime. And we must always remember that politics and policy are about people and relationships, and not parties or candidates. If we're concerned and engaged in kitchen table issues and can discuss them in a cogent manner, and more importantly, as was pointed out, listen to what others have to contribute, you are an influencer.
Julianne, thanks for that. I love what you just said about people. You know, June Cutter, who's running for state assembly in California, her slogan for her campaign is people, not politics. And I think that's so important for us to remind ourselves and our candidates and our party that it's about people, not the politics of the matter. And at the end of the day, most of us want the same things. We just have very different ways of going about and getting them. And so I think as we continue to sharpen our message and refine our message and put people first, that's going to be attractive to people, and particularly to young people. And so Adrian, I'd love to turn that over to you to talk a little bit about what kind of advice you'd give for kind of young women, 30s and under, whatever young means these days, and talk a little bit about what they can do to advance their career in public policy or in politics.
Well, I think in DC in particular, if you want to break into DC, it can be a challenge. A lot of times you have to start interning, you have to figure out how you're going to live, and it's an expensive area. And a lot of people get stuck trying to get into the very popular field. So I know almost everybody on our panel, I've noticed, has like a degree in communications. You know, I have degrees in communications. There's lots of PR people. There are also lots of attorneys. DC has the highest ratio of attorneys in the country. I believe it's 1 out of every 12 people has a JD. So you run into lots of people that have those two backgrounds. So how do you differentiate yourself when you're trying to advance your career? And I kind of fell into technology by accident. I worked for the my campus Office of Information Technology. I learned a lot about computers. I took some programming classes. I learned basically web design, and that made me a lot more appealing to a lot of general communications jobs because I had those abilities. So I always encourage young women to learn a skill that not a lot of people want to learn. So communications is really sexy. It looks like it's going to be fun. You think it's really glamorous. In reality, it's like for every 1 hour of glamour, you spend like 100 in front of a spreadsheet. So, you know, look for jobs that make you essential. Like a lot of people in my company have moved up the ladder very quickly from working in compliance. When you learn FEC compliance rules, you become one of the most essential people on a campaign. And the same goes for state rules, because every state and even major cities have very different compliance laws, and they're all kind of all across the board. They're very crazy. The second one is learn a good side skill. So you might be a communications person. Well, there's lots of PR people, but there's not necessarily as many people know how to edit a video. So learn, you know, some type of good tech skills. Pick up a programming language. You know, learn SQL, learn Python. There's so many different skills, and there's a lot of different online programs that you can learn these skills at home, on weekends. You know, LI teaches a lot of basic classes. Abby Alger does a fantastic job with that. I've taken several of her classes. So there's really amazing places and free resources you can start with to really start building up those kind of softer skills that not as many people have. And if you're still in college, consider going into computer science, graphic design, video editing. Those are just so needed. I can't just begin to describe. If you had a programming degree and you knew SQL and you're a female conservative, you're gonna be like picked up so quickly in DC. You're gonna be one of the most essential people because there's just not a lot of coders or programmers. Those people typically are just naturally gravitate to the left, and people don't always want to go to DC when they're being offered a lot more money on the West Coast. So that's those are really kind of good shortcuts to get into the DC bubble. Then after you get here, you know, we all talk about networking so much, but I think the best advice I got when I first moved to DC was to really be nice and kind to everybody, and to just be discreet. I think we forget a lot of times that the political world is very small. It's a small town, and we all know each other, and we all know each other's reputations. So always try to treat people with respect. I think politics have gotten so nasty that doing this online, but also just in person, you know, avoid gossiping, avoid just, you know, being rude. Always try to be nice, because you never know, that person that you had drama with 10 years ago might end up being on the hiring committee of a job you really want. So it will come back around.
Adrian, that's great advice for young people and for all of us, I think. One of the things I think is so important is to treat people with dignity and respect. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I try to live up to every day. So before I share on social media and retweet and comment, I think about, am I treating people the way I wanted to be treated? And gosh, if more people did that on a regular basis, wouldn't our dialogue change? You know, Dawn, I'd love to go back to something that you said earlier about, you know, we don't want more women in elected office because they're women, right? And I think that that's an important point. None of us want equity for the sake of just having equal numbers at the table. We want qualified, talented people who can carry forth our message, and we want them to be equipped and feel empowered and emboldened to do so. So let's talk a little bit about, why does it matter to have more women at the table? Why is it important, and why does representation matter?
Well, I think it goes back to something that Kelly said earlier in terms of, You know, and I think of my own, you know, professional life as a lobbyist, and the people that, you know, I always have one side, it's the home building side that I'm lobbying and advocating for. But, you know, if we don't have the more diverse voices at the table, I mean, let's be honest, and I'm just going to use housing because that's the background I come from these days is, you know, housing means different things to different people. And so, you know, some people it may mean like the big McMansion. Some people it may mean workforce housing. Some people, like, on every level, it's a different issue, but most laws target housing the same way. So you have to be able to have the conversation. And when I first started lobbying, honestly, I came from the legislature as a staffer, which was male dominated mostly back in the day. We have more women elected these days. I went into the building industry, another male dominated industry. And a lot of times when I started out, I was the only woman at the table having these conversations on behalf of the housing industry. And sometimes it was really hard for our members to grasp that concept. But I think the more women you can bring in, the more diversity you can bring in, because my situation and my personal background that I bring to the table is going to be different than Sarah's. It's going to be different than Kelly's. It's going to be different than yours. Like, it's going to be different than everybody because we were all raised differently. We all come with different backgrounds. And I think it's important for all those voices to be heard, because somebody may bring up a point that I haven't thought about because that's just not in the world I was raised in. And so I think the more we can have women at the table, and diverse women at the table, and men as well, that just makes for a better conversation. And I think the other part of that is, I do believe that women are more apt to get to a solution where men want the win. And so I think as women, when we're at the table, we're willing to give a little bit on issues because we know it's about finding a solution, and maybe sometimes half a loaf is better than the full loaf. And I've had that conversation with a lot of men, like in our organization, like, let's get what we can or you're going to get nothing. But I think as we can have those conversations, it just makes for better public policy at the end of the day. That doesn't mean you can't go back for the other half of the loaf at a later date. But if you can get to that policy solution where nobody really walks away happy. I've been very fortunate to have great women mentors in my professional career. I worked for a female state representative, and her argument was on some very big issues that we ushered through the legislature was, her thing was, if nobody walks away beaming, I know I have done my job, because everybody had to give to get to the solution. And I think women are more willing to work and stay at the table to get a solution and be more inclusive of those voices at the table.
Yeah, Kelly, why don't you just build on that a little bit and talk about kind of what you've seen in the legislature of women, you know, collaborating, working together. Are there any examples of specific policies that you all have been able to enact because women decided to make it a priority?
Yeah, and so in the state of New Mexico, we actually have never had a women's caucus before. And so this past year was the first time we ever had a women's caucus. And I showed up to the meeting, which was a mistake because I got voted president. And what we decided to do as a caucus is actually endorse legislation. And so in our conversations, you know, I have friends that I don't agree with all the time on policy. You know, they're very different from me, but there are so many things we do agree on. And so what we decided is if we had things that we felt that could get bipartisan support. One of the bills was a sex trafficking bill, which I think is a unilateral bipartisan effort that we can all agree on. And so it was presented, and we as a caucus endorsed it. And so by coming together, there are things we're not going to agree on. Those can be put on the shelf. We'll deal with those later. But we as a caucus can all of a sudden come together so that when these bills come up in front of committee, they're looking at it and going, you have a very diverse group of women who are supporting this legislation, and it gives more weight to that legislation. And so I'm honored to be a part of the committee. You know, the other thing that we're doing is we're doing fundraising for scholarships. You know, because one of the things that we've seen is there's a gap You know, if you're young and coming out of college, you know, there's some money available, but if you're returning back to the workforce, if you're an older woman, there's a gap in being able to apply for scholarships. So we're targeting the women going back into the workforce for these scholarships, and that was an idea that we came up together, that we came as a group. So yeah, so we've been able to be very effective at getting good stuff passed. We still have conversations about stuff we don't agree on, but the stuff that we do agree on, you know, we're getting it through.
Yeah, I think there's something really powerful about what I like to call unexpected allies. When you come to the table with people you don't normally align yourself with, or people you don't always agree with, but you can find that one area of common ground where you can work together to get something done, it can be so powerful. And so I think one of the challenges in kind of our polarized climate right now is sometimes it's seen as a point of weakness or an area to attack somebody if they work with the other side. And I think we have to get better at recognizing that to get things done for people, we need to be able to kind of lay down our political banners sometimes and work together and collaborate. And I do think that increasing the diversity of voices, increasing more women's voices, and having more conservative women's voices at the table, we can help do that. Sarah, I'd love to go back to you to kind of keep going on our conversation about the importance of diversity within conservative circles, and particularly center right. I know I've seen you on social media sharing pictures the last few days of some of the good times at past conventions. I was thinking about the past conventions we all got to attend in years past. But tell me a little bit about why you continue to fight for more diversity within the Republican Party, and how we can be allies in that effort.
You know, I thank you, Jen. People ask me all the time, and I'll say black, white, and everyone in between, Sarah, why are you Republican? Why are you conservative? I mean, many of you probably know now black Republicans, make up roughly about, I'd say 6 to 10% of the black population, which is only about 13 or 14% of the nation's population. And so, there's not a lot of us, but the ones that are there, we're pretty, as Jen says, we have loud voices. And I think, one of the things that we saw a shift is when President Barack Obama was elected back in 2008. I remember, I tell friends, fondly, I remember meeting with a group of black Republicans when I was living in DC. And we were sort of at a crossroads as a group, because many of us are conservative. We believe in conservative policies to move not only black communities forward, but to move all our society forward. And that is where we are. And it's personally, who we are. And then by extension, it's the public policy we advocate for. And so when President Obama, then candidate Obama was up, I remember people really, black Republicans being sort of at odds, because it's a tension, right? One of the things that Jen just slightly hit on early on in this conversation is kind of where we are as a nation now related to race. And so, as black Republicans, so I've had people over the years say, why do you say you're a black Republican? Well, that's kind of what I am, but it's like, why do you have to qualify it? Like, Jen doesn't go around saying I'm a white Republican. You see what I'm saying? And so it's that sort of differentiation where, because in America, we're still, especially in states like Texas, my home state, which I love, we still see things in black and white. And so then when you start to look at political affiliation and then by extension advocacy, there's this sense of, we're all women here on this call, but I am a black female Republican, right? And so that's different. There are things I see differently. There are different reactions I will get in different rooms because of those labels and identities and intersectionality. And so to the latter part of what Jen asked, like what can be done? I think, just as we're doing as a nation and communities around the country, I think we need to start listening in or leaning into these intersectionalities of the different perspectives that people bring to the table related to not only, their background. So one of the things I haven't shared on this call is I'm a first generation American, much like Nikki Haley. My parents immigrated here from Sierra Leone in West Africa, at one point, one of the poorest countries in the world, but many of you may know it as a nation that has been war-torn, related to blood diamonds and a lot of other issues and coup d'etats over its history. And so, my culture, even within America, is different in the sense that my Black experience, like I tell my Black friends in town or everywhere, my ancestors were slaves. My great-great-grandfather is in the African American Museum in DC. He was a slave known as a Black loyalist that fought with the British during the American Revolution. And so as a result, he won his freedom and other slaves' freedom. And so they went back to Sierra Leone, and that's where my lineage begins. However, as my parents immigrated here in their late teens in the 70s. And so my culture within this society is different. And so I think in addition to leaning into kind of understanding the various perspectives we bring to the table, I also think as a party, very candidly, we need to also start thinking about our current state of play and the sustainability of some of our advocacy at state level and local levels and nationally on issues that might be not only non-equitable, but also potentially restrictive to the growth and prosperity that we advocate for as a party. I think, we are kind of coming to this reckoning on many things. I think some of these issues that we've either not dealt with, many of them related to, like, for instance, women's reproductive rights, are a little problematic for women of color. And so I think we just need to be thoughtful about that. And I think we can with conversations. We've talked about the divisiveness. I don't think that's a lasting thing, but I think we need to start, having dinner together like they used to back in the day. I mean, that's how we have some of these, major milestone policies like women's rights and civil rights. And so that would be some of my initial conversation.
Sarah, thank you for telling your story. And I always appreciate your perspective so much. And I do think that representation matters. And having different voices and perspectives and life experiences that we don't have helps enrich our conversations. And when we try to enact policies or discuss public policy, we need to think about all those different aspects. And I can try to think about it as much as possible, but I will never be able to have to be able to fully put myself in your shoes or your parents' shoes. And so making sure that we invite people along in those discussions is so important. I shared recently the story of the idea of, when Kamala Harris was nominated last week, there was a lot of stories about, young girls looking in the mirror and saying, wow, I can do that someday too. And I had that moment when Sarah Palin actually accepted the nomination. I was standing on the floor at the convention. It was 3 months after my mother had unexpectedly passed away. So I was in pretty much an emotional state, but I was so excited to see my party nominating a woman and thinking how exciting that was and how much I wanted to call my mom and talk to her about that. And regardless of whether you like Sarah Palin or Kamala Harris, you have to acknowledge that that representation is powerful for little girls, white girls, Black girls, to see somebody that looks like them on that stage. And so I think it's really important that we acknowledge that and acknowledge how powerful it is. I'd love to go to you, Anne, to talk a little bit more about the NFRW and the work that you do. I know in Texas, the Texas Federation of Republican Women is truly the backbone of the party and have been working so hard for decades behind the scenes. I just think that a lot of the women within that movement have been slower to get in front of the scenes and be on the ballot. So you talk to us a little bit about all the hard work that the Federation does and if getting women on the ballot is part of that effort.
Do we have a few hours? The NFRW is an amazing organization. As I said, it's been around for 82 years. And basically, we are an empowerment and support organization. And by the way, the Texas Federation of Republican Women, well, they're having a very healthy competition right now with the California Federation to see who is going to have the most members in the entire country, because they have thousands of members and we have tens of thousands of women. So how do we encourage women to step out behind the scenes? They have to be given the encouragement. I know we've talked about this before, even from running for office or just being encouraged to be a part of what is happening. We have to give them the encouragement and the tools and the support to run for office. And that's where NFRW comes in. We are an amazing organization that is not just about campaigning or lobbying or doing the 36 other things that our 36 committees do nationally. It's about empowering our women to take the steps that they feel that they need and want to take the steps to achieve something in their own lives. I know my own grandmother. She was born in 1900, and when she would tell me the stories about the first time she could vote. She felt like a full-fledged citizen. She could reach for the stars and achieve anything she wanted to achieve. So she became the first person in her family to go to college. She had a support group of her family and her close friends who believed that she could do it, who were there to give her the strength and the tools and the support to be able to take that step. And she did go to college, and she was valedictorian. And basically, she achieved what she felt she could achieve. Now, someone before, I forget who it was, mentioned that we should basically look for positions that are needed to be filled. And that's very important. You know, we were talking about the DC area, but our women have so many talents and so much to offer. It's just a question of finding that niche where they can use their talents and skills and experience and be able to be more comfortable in becoming leaders in their communities and possibly putting their names on the ballot. So we have campaign management schools, the last one obviously being during COVID and being free. These are open to all Republicans. This is what we do on a national level, and this is what TFRW does. Plus, we have the support of our own structure being grassroots up for our clubs, our state federations, and all our national federations to get behind our women to become the candidates and then to become the officials. And we don't stop at that point. We empower our women to, and we ask our women, and that was very important. And yes, we asked 7 times, 17 times, 117 times to run for office. We'll say, Jenifer, you have a gift, and have you ever considered? And we fill in the blank. This is so important for you to give of yourself and also to be an inspiration for others. But once you do decide to run for office, you have the tools, the training, and the support behind you of your federation, of your local women's Republican club, of your state federation, of a national. And we also will deal with members of our organization, such as Senator Marsha Blackburn, who not only is a member of our organization, but also serves on our committees, such as the Legislation and Research Committee. We're there to help her move ahead, and she's there to give back to us. So we have a true symbiotic structure and relationship. So how do we encourage women? We encourage them by giving them the tools and giving them the support and being there for them.
And thanks for all that you are doing to support and encourage women. Julianne, I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about that, kind of in this vein of encouraging and supporting more women's participation. What do you think the hurdles have been for conservative women? Why haven't we seen more conservative women elected thus far? It sounds like all of us are doing a lot to help in the future. But what do you think has been some of the hurdles that have prohibited conservative women from being involved thus far?
Sorry, I think I'm having some technical issues. Did you address me with that question?
About the hurdles that you've seen thus far for conservative women.
Jen, your mic is going in and out, so it's like muffled.
Yeah. So I think what you asked were what are some obstacles that women have in running for office. I would say the number one issue that most women have shared with me is finances. Finances is a huge obstacle in running for office. A lot of women, especially if they've never run for office before or never been in a position where they've been fundraising before, that's a challenge and also a little bit of a surprise at the amount of funds that are necessary in order to run for office. So fundraising and just the knowledge around that would be one of the major obstacles. Another obstacle would be just support, lack of support from members of their community or those in the family. That's often an issue. But I typically encourage women, if you have people supporting you, if this is something that other people can get behind you on, it will definitely be a much smoother effort on your side. But we really do need to support women in helping them learn how to fundraise or show them and offer some instruction on that.
So am I still sound issues? Okay, Adrian.
Adrian.
Can piggybacking off of that, digital and tech is a great way to really help women get involved and looking at it as a springboard, because if you're involved, you're probably on Twitter, or you probably at least know about Twitter, and you spend some time on it. Just sometimes taking a training class and learning how to tweet, having the confidence to do that, to say like, does this look stupid? Like a lot of women feel very self-conscious about that, and having more confidence in their own writing, learning how to do podcasts. Those are great activities, especially getting involved locally. We have such a huge hole in our media ecosystem right now with local news and local blogging. And that is sometimes it's very much a labor of love, because a lot of times you don't get a lot of, it's not glamorous and you don't get a lot of praise, but going to school board meetings, going to the city council meetings, blogging about those, just blogging about how to access voter records, how is your local election commission cleaning up voter rolls. Those are really important topics that women that don't necessarily want to run for office and don't really feel comfortable, asking for money and really getting involved in party politics, you can have a really important role in the political system.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Dawn, I know you wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, so I always say, especially for all candidates, but for women, is you don't know what you don't know. And so running for office, we deal with it pretty much on a daily basis in different things that we do in our lives. But if you've never run for office before and you don't have that sounding board of people who have also never run for office before, you don't know what you don't know. So a few years ago, it's probably longer than that, it seems like the 80s were yesterday, we brought in women who ran in a primary and lost. And we asked them, what they thought should have happened besides them winning, but what were the lessons that they learned? And when we sat down and spoke with them, we learned that although they had never gone through our program, but somewhere along the line, they never got connected with anybody who could give them guidance and advice. So I had one woman who was a homeschooler, and I said, oh, you homeschoolers in Michigan, they're great door-to-doors, right? You tapped into your homeschool network? And like her face was shocked that would never even crossed her mind. And well, you bought a walk list, right? Well, no, I went to every door. And so one day I am going to do a training session on you don't know what you don't know as a candidate. But I think that's where when we encourage women to run, we also need to go in and remember that they don't know what they don't know and just assume because we live in this world that everybody has that same knowledge. And we have to almost break it down to the very basics of what do you need to do and what's your sticky web? Because a lot of people won't even think about their network and who can connect them with whom in the world. And I think that's one of the things is we encourage women and ask women and ask women and ask women. We need to really look at it through their lens too of never being a candidate and not even thinking about, this drives me nuts in my world, a builder will run for office and they will have never reached out to me. And we will have endorsed their primary opponent because I didn't know that we had a builder running in that race. And so even just looking at that sticky web on who you can reach out to connect within your own everyday circle of what you do for a living every day and how that can be connected. I think that's one of the things we need to look at when we're working with conservative women is really laying out all the dots for them so they can be their best candidate.
Dawn, that's such an important point. I love the idea of the sticky web. Who is in your community? Who's in your world? When people ask me, what can I do to start thinking about running for office? I tell them a real practical thing. Start a spreadsheet of who will help you when you're ready to run. I was keeping a Sarver for Congress spreadsheet for decades before I actually ran for Congress. Who in your community has said, if you ever run for office, I'll support you. Take note of that and follow up with them because you'll need support in every way, shape, or form. And I will just echo, Dawn, what you said about you don't know what you don't know. I'd worked in politics and campaigned for 20 years, but until I was a candidate, there was things I just didn't realize. And there's also what you realize is people in your community who may be politically aware, but don't understand the campaign mechanisms. I had people ask me, well, why would I donate to you if I don't live in your district? And most of us involved in politics know it doesn't matter. You want to help influence the process. So you donate to people regardless of whether you can vote for them or not. But I had a lot of people ask me that question. Another thing people asked was, well, what did you do with your business while you were campaigning? I said, well, I did both of them because I'm a single small business owner and my mortgage didn't stop becoming due every month. And so being realistic about the challenges of campaigning and working. And oh, by the way, if you have children, what does childcare look like when you're running for office? And so asking these questions, having these frank and candid conversations are so important. And I think it's really powerful for us to be able to have those conversations with people and to rely on people that have run. Kelly, I'd love to hear just from your perspective, what's one thing that surprised you about campaigning?
So I always joke that people always ask me why I ran for office, and I always say I didn't know better. And I think one of the things running the things that are important. So I had some advice given to me, and this is gonna, I don't know how you guys are gonna take it, but I'm gonna share it to you anyway. But somebody said, just remember that when you're knocking doors, you're running for prom queen. You want people to like you. And that was kind of odd for me because I thought as a policymaker, as a politician, when I talk to people, we were supposed to talk about policy, we were supposed to talk about politics, I was going to explain to them how I was going to change their world. And what I found is people vote for somebody that they like. They vote for you because they have a common interest. They vote for me because I live in the same town as them, our kids go to the same school, and we're sharing the same well. I live in a rural district, so water is a big issue. And I can have those conversations. That's what they care about. And I think one of the things when you're running for office for the first time, you need to know what's important to your district and what's important locally. In my district, where I live, it's a rural district, water is a big deal. When the water is cut off, my phone rings. When we have people that control the water, when they're not doing their job, my phone rings. Those are the issues that are important to my district. But you know what? What's important to your district? Is it is it the new factory going up around the street? Is it the lack of jobs? Is with COVID, that's a whole different thing. Is it the crime? Is it the homelessness? You have to find out. And so one of the things I did is when I started door knocking, instead of telling them my speech, I asked them a question. So what are you most concerned about? And you're always not going to get an answer, because I will tell you, when you start going door to door for the first time, you're interrupting somebody's life. They're doing something. They're fixing their car. They're making dinner. They're watching the game. There's something going on. You're interrupting their world. So when you knock on the door and they don't want to engage with you, don't be offended. You're going to have those people who want you to go away, but they're going to turn around and he's going to go, oh, this lady came to my door. That's pretty awesome. Let's keep her a flyer. So don't be offended by the first response. I would tell them, if you think of something later that you want to share with me, you can text me, call me, or email me. Let me know what your concerns are. And that's how I kind of learned about my community more and more. And so I think that was the biggest surprise, is what I thought were the big issues were not the big issues. And I really had to listen my first time around. And so now I'm kind of like an old pro at door knocking. When I go around, my son drives me and goes, oh yeah, that's the car, or that's the house with the so-and-so, and that's the house with the lady. And they know me now because I've been doing this for so long. And I'd like to hear again. So how's things going, and give those updates. So.
Yeah, I think that you've just hit on something that's so important that we all need to do a little bit better job of, is listening. And you can engage people in a conversation if you ask them a question. And boy, the answers that you'll get when you hear what people are concerned about will surprise you. And I know there's a lot of kind of divisiveness and angst in our country right now. And one of the things I keep telling people is, listen, you need to turn off the national news and tune into your community. There are only so many things you can do about what's happening on the national scene, but there are endless opportunities for you to engage in your hometown, even if it's mostly virtual right now, right? So you can volunteer at a local food pantry. You can get involved in your faith community. You can volunteer for local campaigns. There's so much that you can do. And I think if we were more civically engaged, and that's one of the things I'd love to just kind of start to pose a question to all of you to think about is, what is one step people could take to become more civically engaged in their communities? Because I think there's many people that will never run for office. Some people won't ever volunteer on a campaign, but there's something that we can all do to be more civically engaged and civically minded. And so I think it's incumbent upon those of us who are involved and who are active to invite people along with us and kind of give them some snack-sized bites of civic engagement. What are small steps they can take to get involved? So I don't know if anybody wants to take that question first, or I'm going to call on somebody, but what's one piece of advice you would give for people to get involved in civic engagement? And I saw Anne take her mute off first, so I'll go with her.
Okay, well, I think that's where the what we do in the NFRW is so important. We're not just a political organization. We are a caring organization. We are an organization of tens of thousands of women across the United States who belong to a grassroots up organization. And we, being a grassroots up organization, we are involved in our communities. As a matter of fact, we have a special part of our organization that's called Caring for America, which doesn't just mean caring for America on a national level. It means caring for America in the communities, in the states, and throughout the country. We have women, and this is what one of the things that just really enamored me with this organization. One of the first things that enamored me when I got involved on the national level, I became a part of the National Caring for America Committee. And I had my little region that was a number of states. It happened to have been Region 1, which was out west. And it came to me working with these states, and I found out what they were doing in their communities to make the difference. They were getting involved with having clothing closets, feeding seniors, providing books, doing everything that was possible to help their communities. This is so important that we don't think just about how we can win, but it's how we can help. And through helping, we do win. We do win because we have touched people's lives. And this is so important. When we gave out our Caring for America awards, I remember receiving packets and packets and packets of so many clubs. And we had well over 1,300 clubs nationally, each doing anything between 1 to maybe 10 to 15 different community projects a year. That is civics. That is getting involved in the community. And that is also making a difference in how the community responds to us as Republican and conservative women. If they don't believe that we care about our communities, that we care about our states and nation, why should they get involved in our party? Why should they support our candidates?
That is such an important question. And frankly, as conservatives, we believe in a more limited government. That's one of the core tenets. And so if we are out there serving and helping others, then there's less of a need for government, right? So I think it has an opportunity for us to share a message in a real practical way and show that compassion. Julianne, what do you have to say about civic engagement? What's one piece of advice you'd have for people to get involved?
Well, I just think on a very basic level, just encouraging people to vote in every election. I know here it differs across the country, but here in Virginia, we have elections every single year, whether it's, city council or voting for Congress or, your state elected officials. There's elections every year. So I would just encourage people to make that effort because, voter turnout, frankly, is very low, just historically and regularly. So turning out to vote, but also before you vote, finding out who the candidates are and taking some time to do your homework, before you get into that voting booth. So I think that's just at a very basic level. That would be the number one thing, is just vote in every election.
Yeah, and we have to remind ourselves that we are gathered today on this 100th anniversary of a women's right to vote. So if you stay on the sidelines, you are not participating in that legacy. And so it's so important and so fundamental. And you're right, too many people only show up once every 4 years, if that. And so we need to encourage participation in all elections and runoff elections and be informed voters. Sarah, what would you say to people about civic engagement? What's one piece of advice or a recommendation you'd have about how to get involved?
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I've got many thoughts. I agree with everything that's been said. I think, obviously voting, but really, I think one of the big issues, the big threats ahead of us as an electorate is the fact that, right now we're looking at really high, unprecedented voter turnout numbers, which is amazing. But we're here because of a series of a number of events that led us here, that people felt called to the polls. I think that now, as I was sharing with a friend earlier today, it's incumbent upon all of us as citizens of this nation to follow these candidates. And once they're elected, really pay attention, watch the news, as you were saying, but also watch them and see where their positions are over the course of 2 years or 6 years. But I think, most importantly, we've got to invest in these communities. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about is sort of the long-term horizon of how we as Republican women and Republicans really begin to better align with a lot of these burgeoning communities, not just suburban areas, but the urban areas where I think there's also great opportunities, where I live in Dallas. And so I think the way to do that is by getting engaged civically on a board or a commission that's outside of your comfort zone. So I sit on the foundation board for Parkland Hospital here in Dallas, which is our safety net hospital, one of the largest in the nation. And through that, I have seen how healthcare policy is adversely affecting a lot of our communities of color. And so a lot of my healthcare advocacy is now around some of that knowledge. And I think for folks who either want to run for office one day, or who just want to understand what's happening at the local level, Jen, as you said, because the local impact the magnitude is immense. I think that's something that folks really need to think about, and it's going to have a bigger role in the.
I love that recommendation to kind of step outside your comfort zone and get involved in something that's not your normal everyday advocacy. Find an organization that you are interested or curious about, that you can serve on their board or even volunteer at, to just understand issues a little better. Adrian, I'm going to come next to you with this question, but I also wanted to remind anybody that's listening, we'd love to take listener questions or viewer questions. So please pop them in the chat and we'll get to those in just a second. So Adrian, what advice do you have about getting civically involved?
One of the favorite things that I do is, I'm very lucky in Northern Virginia. I happen to live within walking distance of my polling location, and I will take the early morning shift on election days and just hand out sample ballots to people. I can usually go, like, basically roll out of bed, walk over to the polling location, hand out sample ballots, and then my shift is over with before I have to get to the office, when we still into the office. And I can't tell you how many local parties desperately need people to hand out literature at every precinct in the country. Because you need to do it all day long. And I think in Virginia, our polls open at like 6 and they're closed at 7. So you need to have somebody there. So that's very low pressure, very easy to do. And they're always happy to have people do it. Another low pressure idea is just commit to going to 1 or 2 school board meetings or city council meetings or county commission meetings. I'm sure with everything going on in our schools right now, the next school board meetings across the country are probably going to be packed. And I'm sure we're going to see like record numbers of people running for school board. But those are just go and observe. And then if you want to get a little more involved, you don't have to join any parties or committees, just live tweet what's going on, just report. A lot of times the details get bogged down when the local TV station does 2 or 3 minute reports in the local school meeting, and they ended up talking about, something really serious that didn't get the attention of the reporter. So just be aware, be there, and those are very easy things to do.
I love your comments about working at the polling location. I've actually been considering signing up for the first time, I'm embarrassed to admit, to work the polls this fall. And partially because one of the things I think we're all aware of is many of the people that work at the polls are elderly. And in the middle of a pandemic, it's dangerous for them to be out. And so I think that it's important civic engagement and advocacy for us to step into those roles, and particularly to encourage younger people. It's such an important way to be a part of our democratic process. And I think we're going to need more poll workers all across the country. And so there's an organization called Poll Heroes, which has just started up, and it's high school and college students that are encouraging young people to work the polls, which I love and think it's a really important way for people to get involved. Dawn, what advice do you have around civic engagement? Maybe some low stakes things that folks can do to feel more participatory and involved?
Yeah, so I always love it when all my worlds, like all my circles connect. And so I just want to tell you a story about a friend of mine. Because my world has been political, and she is a dance studio owner here in Michigan, and they are still not open yet. And so she's never been the engaged type. She's more of the like art side type, and then when we get together, then I have this side of like the political side type. She's followed all the rules in COVID. She's obeyed all of our executive orders. She has not opened because of her integrity. She doesn't believe that's the right thing to do. But her school schedule does start when schools start, and she has had enough. So today she went and testified before a joint House and Senate committee in the state of Michigan on COVID and the impact it's had on her business. And I've been able to help her with that in terms of connecting her with people that I know. And so that's been really fun to watch somebody who typically isn't involved in advocacy, then to find their voice and use it well for a purpose. The other thing though is I'm also the executive director of Skill to Build Michigan Foundation, which is our homebuilders 501c3. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing is going in and talking to classes about the opportunities in career. So we've partnered with Junior Achievement in our state, and they call on me to come in and do kind of round tables and talk with kids. But then the other thing we did this year until we got COVIDed was March is Reading Month. And in the state of Michigan, they have required each grade level to have a career appropriate age level training for kids. And so we actually printed a book called Billy the Build-A-Bear Built a House. And we went in and read. The goal was to give 20,000 books out to K through third graders on the housing industry through this Billy the Build-A-Bear project. We got halfway through March, and then our schools all shut down on the 15th. But to go in and have those conversations with littles, the questions that they come up with, just like you left and your heart just felt full. And I think that's what everybody feels when they get involved with some project, right? You feel so much better once you've given. You feel like you've received so much more when you walk out the door. And I think until people actually experience that and make that first step, it's a feeling that you can't describe. Because for the week, like that was literally the last thing I did as being able to work in my office because everything shut down that Monday. And so like I took that with me as like my last thing was talking to kindergarten, first, second, and third graders. And boy, they have a lot of questions, let me tell you. But to give back and open their eyes to something and hear the questions and see it through their lens is just an amazing thing. And there are so many community groups that are in need right now of help because of COVID, because maybe their volunteers haven't been able to show up, that it's the perfect opportunity, whether it's with the Humane Society and pets, I would bring them all home, or, working with kids because they're going to need some tutoring since our schools aren't open right now to be able to give back in those ways.
I'll say that just echoing the power and the importance of that kind of volunteerism and how it serves you. Like when you're feeling stressed out about what's going on in the world, when you take a step back and serve others, boy, that fills your heart and really puts things into context. I've spent a lot of time at the Central Texas Food Bank, and there's nothing more powerful than seeing thousands of cars line up to get free food, and just the power of that impact of your action of helping put together those boxes and put it into somebody's cars and them saying thank you and bless you. It was not just heartwarming, but also makes you realize some of the challenges that we face and how people are being so impacted by this pandemic. And I will say that, to the point of your friend testifying, for somebody who hasn't been involved before, that's a big step. And I think that there's going to be a lot more people who recognize that their stories matter, especially those people who say, oh, I'm not involved in politics, or I'm not interested in politics. I think we have seen in the last 6 months how politics is interested in you. whether you partake or not, it's going to impact your life. And so people feeling empowered to step up and to share their stories in formal settings, like testifying at a hearing or at a committee, but also just sharing their stories with the public and with one another, and recognizing that advocacy and that appealing to your legislators is part of our job as citizens, and for them to know how the policies are impacting us and impacting our businesses and our livelihoods and our schools. And so using those voices to engage in constructive conversations and civil conversations is so important. Kelly, I think I haven't asked you this question yet. So what advice would you have for people around civic engagement?
Everybody had such great answers. And so the only thing I want to add is basically find the issue that matters to you. And so I want to kind of tell you a story. So we had a bill that's been presented in the legislature for years, and it's just a bill that I have not supported. As a conservative woman, it's just something that I've always struggled with. It's anti-business. And it just doesn't ever support my values. And so the bill's always died. And I also have a very dear friend who's, she's very conservative, and she's part of a pro-life organization. And she actually went through our RISE Academy, and she actually went to the author of this bill, and they had a conversation about how to meet in the middle. And for the first time in 8 years, you had a very far left, far right group standing up supporting this bill because it supported both sides of the aisle. And it took a conversation. And so, I'm very proud that she went through our academy to get involved and to know how to do that. But for her, it was an issue. This was an issue that she got the argument, she understood what was trying to happen, but it wasn't coming across correctly. And so find out the issues that are important to you and figure out how you can affect that. Maybe it's a local activist group. Maybe it's within your school, whatever. Maybe you need to bring the soccer moms together. I don't know what that looks like, but find the issues because that's going to jump you in to getting more involved.
Yeah, what's your why? Why do you care? Why? What is your personal connection? What about your life and your story and the lives of your families and other people in your network are impacted? And then you'll find that passion, that issue that matters. In just the last few minutes as we wrap up, I'd love for you all to just think of kind of one word of inspiration, one last comment for each person to make as we close out this town hall and this discussion of the centennial anniversary of the 19th Amendment and the role that women have and can continue to have in building a stronger conservative movement and engaging more people in the process of politics and public policy. I think it's important for us to demystify this process for people who are scared of it and make sure that they feel that they can access the halls of power, that they can access elections. And every one of us have mentioned organizations we're involved in or groups that we're a part of that have resources, and free available resources online right now is a great way for people to get involved. So as we just wrap up here with these last comments, I'm going to go first to Dawn, to you, and then I'll go around the horn to everyone.
Impactful.
Sarah?
Equity.
Adrian?
Innovate.
Julianne?
Freedom.
Anne?
Perseverance.
And Kelly?
Wrong.
I can't think of a better way to wrap up than all of those words that are motivating and inspiring. And I'm so grateful to each of you for spending some time today and sharing your stories. I'm going to invite Dina to come back in and wrap us up and send us off for the day. But I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to moderate the conversation. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've been inspired. I hope you've found a little piece of civic engagement that you can go off and partake in today and celebrate this centennial.
Sorry, just had to get a picture of all of us together. Thank you, ladies, for smiling. This was absolutely inspiring. I loved every moment of it, and I'm so glad that I got to sit back and listen and learn from you all about what inspires you, what drives you, and what makes you want to do, and the advice to young women. It was also spot on. So thank you so very much. As we close out, I'm just going to share my screen one more time. Again, this is the Leadership Institute website, and you click on that little light bulb or the training to get to our training. I'm going to show you where to go to watch the replay of this because we are going to get that up, and I'm going to try to get it up tonight still if at all possible. But this is our on-demand classroom, the leadershipinstitute.org/on-demand classes is another way to get there direct. Whoopsie, class. on-demand something. That went terribly wrong all of a sudden. / on-demand. You know what? We've been having trouble with that system all day. So I'm going to just hit the back button and show it to you this way. So anyway, on-demand classes will work later today because I'm going to go in and fix that website. But this is where all of the different presentations are that we've got up on our on-demand. And this one today is going to be in our one that is called right down here, Campaign Pros. It's the very last one. And so if anybody wants to watch this or play it for your daughters or your nieces, in my case, I don't have a daughter, I've got a niece, and show it to her and help her get more involved and show her why she needs to be more civically involved. The information is there, and the link will be there. The video will be posted there. So again, I thank you all so very much for being on. As we've said, this is the 100th anniversary of the enrollment or the adoption of the 19th Amendment, which is amazing, and you guys are amazing. That is all I have for today. So if there is anybody else, anything else, any final words from anybody else? Nope. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so very much. Thank you, attendees, for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you the next time that we have any of our on-demand classes or any of our online classes. The next one for my department, and I will be speaking on it, is Thursday. It's the class on the persuasion, and all about 3 sessions on all about how to better persuade people. So thank you guys so very much. We will see you maybe on Thursday. Bye-bye.